Hello and welcome to another installment of My View from the Piano Bench. We do this here on my Joe Holt's Notes YouTube channel every Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. And the topic tonight is Jazz Vespers. And the reason that came to mind, it wasn't on my radar screen at all until a few days ago, is because there was a Jazz Vespers service that I was going to participate in along with my friends Sharon Sable and Sean Casani. And if you follow me, you may have noticed that on my schedule, but the weather here was a little dicey and we rescheduled it until May. Weather will be much nicer, most likely, in May. Part of the problem of that Jazz Vespers service is it's not so close to home. I live on the eastern shore of Maryland. Sharon and Sean live up near Wilmington. They're maybe an hour closer than I am, but still another good hour and a half to Cape May, New Jersey, all the way on the ocean, all the way across the state. So having that been canceled just brought to mind the whole Jazz Vespers concept, what I've been involved in, and maybe a little perspective I can share. But first, a little inside thing for those of you from New Jersey. Remember, I said the church is in Cape May. And those of you particularly from South Jersey, you probably already know what I'm going to play. The rest of you, unless you're from Philly maybe, probably have no idea. On the way to Cape May, this whole little story unfolds, going through all little shore towns, working your way down as south as you can go in New Jersey to Cape May. Last line. So if you're going to be my spouse, better head to that courthouse. Cape May Courthouse, that is. All right. That had really nothing to do with anything, but thank you for your indulgence. All right. So like many jazz musicians, put myself in that category. It's the correct one, as much as I struggle with it. I've been involved in a number of Jazz Vespers services. And like I said, this got me reflecting on my experiences with Jazz Vespers, but in particular, the period going on now 20 years ago almost, when I was the worship arts director of the Chestertown Church of the Nazarene, which is the area where I live, and I led a Jazz Vesper series at the church. So it may have been the case, actually, it was the case, I think, that the pastor, whose name is Jonathan Mills, good friend of mine, that he and I were probably the only jazz fans in this very rural church. Right? We had a nice little run with it. And if you watched Inside the Process, which is the predecessor to this series that was on my Facebook page and then my Joel's Notes 2021, last year's YouTube channel, and I think this particular video I'm referencing is on in both places. You'll recall maybe an interview with my good friend Beth McDonald, who I met at the Chestertown Church of the Nazarene. And when I was on staff there, you may remember this story, my job was to nurture the talents and encourage the ministries, both inside and outside the church, of those people who were musically inclined. So we developed music in the church, but we also developed the musicians to equip them to better facilitate their own path. Right? And Beth was among the people with a bullseye on her back because of how talented she was. And it took a while, or how talented she is. And I finally persuaded her to sing a solo in church. And as talented and as gifted as she was unwilling to sing by herself. She loved singing harmony and backup and singing behind people. But we like the joke that the first time she sang in public by herself in church was to sing the song. Of course, we didn't say, at least initially, it was a Jazz Vesper service, but we said the first song she sang in public by herself in church was Stormy Weather. Wait, missed. That's better. keeps raining all the time. Yeah, the first Jazz Vesper service that I oversaw at the Chestertown Church of the Nazarene. So in a Jazz Vespers service, there is a liturgy involved, a liturgical service. It's not a free-for-all. It's prescribed, and there are prescribed readings. And jazz selections are a part of the liturgy. There's not just like a jazz concert from front to back. There are pre-described moments of reflection, openness, and receptiveness. And then musicians can offer what they do, jazz, in the context of the worship experience. You know, whatever that jazz is to them. And hopefully to everybody else. Ha. wasn't necessarily planning to do that, but I navigated through some different styles in that tune, or different meters anyway, in the tune All the Things You Are. Talk about a jazz standard from the Great American Songbook era. So the Jazz Vespers experience is not about the religious affiliation of the musicians, but it is an acknowledgement of the spiritual dimensions of music. So I'm going to take a detour for a minute from Jazz Vespers specifically and recount something. And this is an occasion, it will happen from time to time, that if you have seen the Inside the Process videos, you're going to hear a story repeated. But this was an important one, and it was the day it dawned on me that music making is in fact a spiritual discipline, and the whole thing about music is that it exists outside of us. It exists beyond our egos. It exists beyond us. One saying that my friend Bruce Kaminsky would often mention, and this is relevant to Jazz Vespers in terms of a group of jazz musicians playing, he would say that two people or more can make music together is proof of the existence of God. Now, you can take that however you want, and you can take the term God however you want, but you can acknowledge in this that we're talking about something that happens kind of out here. Although, we can have the esoteric discussion about in here and out here and all that's one place, which is ultimately what this is about, right? But for me, the light bulb went on when I was watching a video of Keith Jarrett. This was back in, I guess, 2006. And I didn't know this at the time, but I realize now that when you see these videos of Keith, and these are some of the ones that have the most views and are the most noted, when he's playing solo, and he's playing recognizable tunes, and he's playing them relatively inside, these are encores that he does after his free-form solo concerts. And when you listen to some of those solo concerts, they're kind of nothing like the encores. But the encores, I think, serve an important place in those concerts. I've never been to any of them. And of course, Keith will never play again, having suffered a stroke, or very likely will never play again. And I'll never get the chance, but I would have not chosen to go anyway, because I would have been so, I think, caught up in the tension of needing to suppress a cough or anything else like that, that it would have taken away from the experience. So I'm grateful for YouTube and the videos and such. But there's a beautiful video of Danny Boy, there's one of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and there's others, and they're just beautiful expressions of pianistic greatness, really. But this one was of the Miles Davis tune Solar. And as those jazz tunes tend to be, particularly the ones that were written as jazz tunes, they're just as much or more than anything vehicles for improvisation than they are. I mean, they're about the tune, but really a tune like that is about a vehicle for improvising. I remember, and I risk really getting off the subject, when I went to see Chick Corea live, the one time that I did play solo, and he declined a request to play Spain. I think it was Spain. But he put it in the category of he really didn't want to play his own tunes, because all he was going to do is use them to improvise over. It's a vehicle for improvisation, meaning it wasn't going to be about his tunes. So he didn't want to subject his tunes to that. That's a slightly cynical version. And I'm actually not cynical about it, I understood. But he just wanted to take other people's tunes and ignore them. You know what I mean. I think I know what I mean. I'm not sure. But anyhow, but what Keith was doing over that tune, as I watched it go on and on and on and take different forms and stylistic detours and such, I was realizing that he wasn't constructing it. And I've since heard a wonderful quote from Keith that I have said often now, and I'll say a lot because it's beautiful and I relate to it. He says, when I sit down at the piano, my hand knows what to do. And not only does my hand know what to do, if I try to tell my hand what to do, I'm stopping it. And not only am I stopping it, I'm stopping it from doing something better than I could think of. And it was obvious that he wasn't constructing a solo. He was letting the solo happen. He was letting the improvisation form itself. Now, that's not to say that there are not great jazz musicians who construct solos. That's not the point. The point is how it relates to me and the light bulb that went on for me, and how it was my path to finally understand in a deeper way music as a spiritual pursuit. And I came out of that video after watching it over and over and over again, realizing that, you know, Keith was allowing it to come through him. It was something that had nothing to do with analysis. I remember realizing after watching that video 70,000 times, or at least 7, I don't know, that analysis was not the path to the music. Analysis is for after the fact, allowing yourself to express where the expression most deeply comes from is the path to the music. So that acknowledgement of music being a spiritual discipline really led me to all the other places I've been able to go since. And as I've said before, it sounds like an excuse, and maybe to some extent it is, but I don't really mean it to be, because every moment is its own thing and its own charge to be a part of. It can make it complicated for me to like talk and yammer and, you know, use one part of my brain and then sit and open and go from another. So I'm a lifelong student of this, and if I know anything, it's because I'm just beginning to learn and just beginning to figure it out. But I'll play a little bit. I'm certainly not as deep as Keith will get, not nearly so. And so much not nearly so that I forget how it goes. Oh yeah. But this was my little wake-up call to the idea that it's more than just about what we can think of. It's bigger than that. But if you want to see that done amazingly well, unbelievably to me anyway, well, go to YouTube, or you're on YouTube, aren't you? After you're done with this, look up Keith Jarrett Solar. It's like a 9-minute and something video. And I'm aware that that won't speak to everyone, at least in the way it spoke to me, but it really, really, really spoke to me. So, we're acknowledging the spiritual dimensions and the spiritual applications of music. Whether or not we play tunes that are associated with religious themes. It's not necessary in the Jazz Vespers service to play spirituals and hymns, at least not exclusively, but adding one or two can be a nice touch. But with the idea of jazz, and this is actually kind of a tricky big subject and a potential rabbit hole. If you're playing a tune with lyrics, you are using those lyrics to inform how you're going to approach the tune, ideally. Not all musicians do. But there's sort of an emotional framework sort of given to you. But once you're really inside the tune, the music is taking over. And if you're playing a tune like Solar, where I'm sure words are written after the fact, I'm not aware of them. I don't know if I've ever heard them, but all those jazz tunes, words came later. But the words don't define, the lyrics don't define those tunes. And when the jazz musician is improvising, it's that musical space that I'm really talking about. And when you have, like a hymn tune or a spiritual or an old gospel tune or something like that, the words, like any tune, are going to be there, and actually having those words be part of that experience is cool. I don't know, I feel like I'm talking in circles. So let me just play a tune that is shared between church hymnals and traditional jazz. Since the closer walk with thee. Always a fun tune to do. What am I doing? I don't know. All right, so the broader theme, and I think I've just gone out of order, so I'm going to be a little confused here. Something might be disjointed, but I'll try to piece it together. We're going to move on and talk about the broader theme or topic of music in a church service or music in a worship service. And because I have a pretty good history of church work in two significant positions, one for 11 years when I was much younger, and then more recently a shorter tenure at the Church of the Nazarene. I'm a little bit familiar with different approaches or in theological traditions, especially where I came from before the Nazarene Church. So what role does music play in a church service? And it really depends on, you know, your outlook and your interpretation of things. And one role that music can play in church service is none at all. And there are churches who hold to that. Or no instruments, but you can have singing, prescribed singing. Or you can use particular instruments and exclude others. Or you can focus on one cultural expression and hopefully do it very well. You know, and an obvious example of that would be the old timey gospel-y Hammond organ, you know, church, or the African American church. I was actually using the same instrument, going two different directions with it, but it's a particular cultural expression, and they own it. Or a church can focus on a whole mess of cultural expressions not done so well, which seemed to be an epidemic 15, 20 years ago when I was involved in the scene. And that to me is like not good. But then ideally, the recognition of differing cultural expressions and a commitment to doing all of them well. Now, the reason that's tricky is because different cultural expressions often require different musicians, or a musician at the helm who can move around between, you know, a groove-oriented rhythm section-based thing and a classically based thing, and everything in between. But often, if you really want to have specific cultural expressions done well, you get musicians that live there. And this brings us back to the idea of jazz vespers. And you're bringing in the jazz musicians who live there and do that to provide that cultural expression, or just that musical expression. I keep using the word cultural, which you can't get away from, but, you know, stylistic, you know, whatever other words you want to use. So let's say you take that tune I played, All the Things You Are, right? So if somebody plays All the Things You Are on piano, you know, one way or the other, however they do it, they get the sheet music out or whatever, does that mean they play jazz? No, it's what they do with it. It's how they express it. And a jazz verse for service then is not about the tunes you play. And that's kind of what I was getting at about stuff not done well. There was a term that was used a lot. I don't know if it's used today. I'm actually not part of that particular scene anymore. I take my expression a slightly different direction now. But blended worship was the term. And to me, blended worship was taking the same, you know, musicians and opening the book of varied tunes and, you know, playing an old Fanny Crosby hymn and then playing a very classically based traditional church hymn, and them playing something from 1985, and them playing some folk thing, but it's not getting into those styles and getting into those expressions specifically. It's just playing those tunes. If that's a blend, it's not. Well, I'm not going to say anything else because I don't mean to be harsh. This is a constructive criticism of the process and an acknowledgement that Jazz Vespers really plays a role in when you have that music, you're having it done by people who can really do it. And no disrespect to any other musicians. But this leads me to a story. And again, in my previous series, I told this story that when I came on board at the Chestertown Church of the Nazarene, and my objective, my charge was to develop the talents and the skills and the ministries and the expressions of musicians in the church. And we didn't really have a music program. It was a small church and not a whole lot was going on. So, okay, we need a worship band. We need a rhythm section. Piano, bass, and drums. That's how we're going to get started. I don't think we really had a guitar player to plug in. So we did piano, bass, and drums because there was two musicians, but middle-aged guys, roughly my age, one a little older, one a little younger. Amateur rock and rollers, both of them. And it's like, okay, guys, we're going to do this. You game? Yeah. And what I did was essentially, as best I could, taught them, guided them to be able to move between styles, to be able to express, not by playing tunes. Here's my critique of, and again, it sounds slightly cynical, sorry, of what I sometimes see in church worship bands. That every tune is an event, and you learn the event, right? And so you rehearse every week, and you learn the event of this tune and this tune and this tune. And I said to the guys, we're not doing that, because when you're making music together, you are learning how to communicate as one. You're learning how to convey the music. You're learning the skills required. It's just like every time you have a conversation, do you rehearse the conversation? Is that an event? No. And so like we're gonna become a real band here, okay? And we did. After a number of months, we could go all these different directions, and it gave me the opportunity. Because keep in mind, these guys were not jazz guys. Especially starting out, and it wasn't the objective to make them jazz guys. It was the objection to make them make the pool go deeper in both of them. But that does kind of take you to, they kind of understood that if you're like wanting to use musicians in an all-purpose role, like as a studio musician or something like that, get the jazz guys, because they're the guys who can go those different places. And I'm actually not including myself in that, because there's some skill sets that I just don't have in my free expression, where am I zone. But anyway, all that to set up that I got this idea for one of the special offerings that they take, where there was typically an old hymn played behind it. I said, okay, we can do this. We're going to do something different. And we all had sort of a laugh and a chuckle when we were doing a little ritual for, I think it was the alabaster offering. And people, like kids, were bringing up their monies. I forget how it was, but they put it in this little church box, right? And instead of playing Onward Christian Soldiers, the band kind of just swung a little bit. Every time it rains, it rained. Pennies from heaven, inside the church, in the offering plate. Yeah. All right. So, one of the things that guided Jonathan, the pastor, and I with the concept of jazz vespers, and also what I was attempting to do with music in the church, was acknowledge that music as an expression of creation is itself revelation. And I'm not going to quote the Bible verse and go into like semi-preaching mode about how that is theologically based. But the experiences that we have as we connect with nature, as we connect with creation, are those that will bring us outside of ourselves and bring us into that spiritual place and bring us to God. Okay? And they are indeed revelatory. And again, I go back to, I'm going to have to write this book. I'm telling you so many times I want to write this book that's called Everything I Ever Needed to Know in Life I Learned at the Piano. I got to get going with that thing. So there's a particular hymn that's beautiful in that regard. And I'm going to play it. And it's called This Is My Father's World. This is my father's world. All right. Now, actually, that's the point at which I had written my script to end, except I skipped over something. And so this is going to be an insert that sort of stands by itself and makes the ending not so whatever that ending would have been. And that's the idea of, in the Jazz Vesper service, or just in general, and for me it's kind of a procedure, it's important to play tunes that people know. Now, of course, not everyone's going to agree with that. But in the historical practice of jazz, back when it was popular music that was being played, you know, the jazz musician would improvise over tunes that people could relate to, even if the melody wasn't heard. And the famous example of that was sometime in the 30s when Coleman Hawkins, I believe, had a big hit with Body and Soul. And he did not play the melody, but everybody knew it was Body and Soul, and they related to it as Body and Soul. And the word sometimes is used accessible, and then it becomes kind of a controversial thing with some musicians, who it's like, no, it's not about being accessible, it's about being deep, and it's about challenging the person to, you know, get to that point where they can take it in, and, you know, or the painting hanging in the museum is not responsible whether somebody gets it or not. That has nothing to do with its value. Then you have this whole rabbit hole thing, and it's one that I spent a lot of time, you know, burrowing through, you know, different tunnels of that. Coming out kind of on the side of everything all at once, but within the framework of you are relating to the people around you, period. You know, and you don't ignore your audience. You connect with your audience, and it doesn't change what you do substantively. It just requires you to consider there are other people in the room besides yourself, right? And so our church was not the only one. There were others, and I participated in one that I'm going to reference a YouTube video for, where you would typically play recognizable tunes, jazz standards, things that people could relate to. And in the, you know, rural culture church where I was, that was essential. And I remember there was one time where I was out away for that particular week that Jazz Vespers was. And so I had a friend of mine, really good musician, come in, and I didn't, you know, tell him what he needed to do. He did it the way he would do it. And he brought in players, one in particular, that played kind of out, you know, and it wasn't the inside, you know, jazz that people were used to from me, and it didn't play well in the church. And it was a learning experience for me, and that of course opens a whole, you know, door of room, you know, of, or building of, you know, cans of things. But it's always a good idea to play things that are accessible and tunes people know. So I'm going to play a tune that is posted on a YouTube video. This is back in 2007. Usually Jazz Vespers are not done with solo musicians, but this particular Jazz Vespers service, I did solo piano. I think I posted Meet the Flintstones and Autumn Leaves. It might have been something else. So you can find them by searching just my name and the tune. And I'm not going to replicate what I did with Autumn Leaves. I watched it today, and I'm like, I like some of it and didn't like some of it. And I was getting distracted because I'm looking at that and saying, you know, I really want to reference that video. Maybe I want to reference something else. You know, my mind doesn't turn off. I don't know about you. So it's been, how many years since 2007? Going on 15? So I don't play it in the same key anymore. Could play it in that key, but Anyway, you can look that up if you want to. I'm just going to play one more tune, and off we go. Except I don't remember what I'm doing. Sacrilege. Nah. So there we go. I hope you found that interesting in some way, or hope you're still here. Thank you to those of you who provide support and encouragement via the link in the description, and I hope to be able to keep doing this. So I'll see you tomorrow night for Piano for My Friends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping in touch. Hope to see you soon. Bye.